Today, we're going to talk with a guy who did 1,200 podcast episodes and give you tips on how you can be successful. That's your open.
Welcome, business podcasters, to another episode of Podcasting and Professional Services. And today, you're going to get podcasting tips from a savvy tech podcaster with over 1,200 episodes under his belt. Today, my guest is John Gilroy, host of the Federal Tech Podcast, host of the Constellations podcast, a podcast by Kratos, and also the host of his new show, Farm Kid, City Kid, which looks at big ag tech. And I think you're really going to like what John has to say, the stories that he has. John is actually also an active ocean swimmer, and he has a great story about that as well. But before we get to my conversation with John Gilroy, imagine you could build trust with buyers at scale. Imagine you were able to create endless content all from one source and accelerate your networking growth. Well, that's the power of podcasting. And if you're ready to launch a podcast for your business, go to redcedarmarketing.com, reach out to me on LinkedIn to get a conversation started. All right. And now for my conversation with John Gilroy. Today, my guest is John Gilroy, who has an extensive media background locally here in the DC region, including more than a weekly column in the Washington Post for over 10 years, from 94 to 04. John is an award-winning lecturer at Georgetown University and managing partner at the Oakmont Group, where he helps tech leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs nail their podcast appearance. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, did I write that intro? That's a pretty good intro, man. Huh? It's pretty good, huh? I didn't even believe it.
Well, you lived it, so.
I know, but no one believes half the stuff that happens to me. So we'll talk podcasting. We'll talk whatever you want.
Sure. Yeah, well, I do want to get into that. And you are the host and moderator of the Federal Tech Podcast, Constellations, a podcast by Kratos, and then your new podcast, Farm Kid, City Kid. So
Farm Kid, City Kid, about to launch.
We're going to get into all of that. But before we start, John, I just want to call attention to the fact that you are an active ocean swimmer. And I just think this is really, really cool. You've swam the Chesapeake Bay 3 times. On a recent episode, I believe it was either Federal Talk or Constellations, you mentioned your son is actually training for a triathlon too.
Yeah.
What inspired?
It's not close to where you live. In fact, my next swim is it's in Bumpus, Virginia. It's called the Rumpus and Bumpus. I think it's like
is that how you pronounce that name?
Yeah. Well, we got to be careful about that, you know.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm crazy enough to do that stuff, and then my next race after that, I got a lake race. And then I do my regular ocean swim in LA in August. So yeah, I do that stuff. It's I have a son who's an adult. He thinks he's stronger than me. We ain't gonna let that happen.
Okay, so the spirit of competition is alive and well in your house.
Yeah, man.
That's good. So what inspired you to start?
Well, I'll give you the honest answer if you want. You don't want to hear it,
please.
My grandfather was named John Gilroy. He had one son named John, and my grandfather died at age 53. My father's named John Gilroy. He had one son named John, and he died at age 53. I had one son, Kevin, and I was looking at 53 going, what the heck? I'm going to leave my wife with 3 kids and die? Ain't going to happen, man. And so I got pretty crazy, and I started, doing all this silly stuff and still doing it. And I just think it's a fitness thing too. And it's hard to do. If you have an annual goal, it's like, okay, August 3rd, I'm going to be in the Dwight Crum peer-to-peer race in LA, 2 miles, 63-degree water. What's my best time? 1:04. Well, what can I do to beat that? Okay. And so when you get it in the pool at 6:30 in the morning or 7 o'clock, you have, I'm not doing this for the sake of doing it. I've got that goal.
Yep.
Okay. And I think that's what your podcasters have too. They shouldn't podcast for the sake of podcasting. They say, okay, I'm doing this silly podcast. What's the deal? Why should I do that? How is it going to improve my bottom line? And if it doesn't improve your bottom line, stop. So that's why I do the physical fitness, because I think it's long-term goals, and maybe I passed through the 53 barrier, I'd say, so I'm pretty safe. And my son's Kevin, not John.
There you go. I'm actually the 3rd John in my lineage, and my boys are named Billy and Bodie. So. Good.
The B&B boys.
That's right. Well, masterful segue, by the way, going from long-term goals of ocean swimming to the long-term goals of your podcast. Can you give our listeners, just so that they understand, the types of topics that you talk about on your shows, can you give us, an overview of the Federal Tech, Constellations, and then Farm Kid, City Kid?
Yeah. Well, the general umbrella is technology,
Mhm.
because I have a long experience in technology. I was a guest on National Public Radio for 25 years, talking tech. The Washington Post had me write tech. I teach tech. And so it's generally, and there's categories under there. In 2017, a company approached me and said, we got this silly idea to do this satellite podcast. And no one cared. It was like a small niche and no one cared. And I said, let's launch it. And so we launched in 2017. We started doing interviews. And then lo and behold, we had this guy named Elon Musk show up and this guy, Jeff Bezos. And we got cars in space. And the podcast is doing extremely well. You can go to constellationspodcast.com. And now we have 4 full-time writers. And so I recorded an interview yesterday with a woman from Intelsat. And it was a great interview. And so I didn't pick them. It was in the general category of technology. And so the other one is a Federal Tech Podcast. And I was with a company called Federal News Network, and I was there for 15 years. I did 730 interviews. And I said, hey, give me more money. I said, no. I said, I love you. And I left and started Federal Tech Podcast. And first 6 months, it was flat. Then I cried myself to sleep. And then I figured it out. And I've been hockey stick after the first 6 months. So general category, it could be, if your general category is finance, you could have something in there. If your general category is technology, what if your general category is agriculture? Well, that's different too. So I have this funny world where best man at my wedding's a farm kid, and I married a farm kid. My wife's born and raised on a farm. And so I've had this connection all the time. And I was getting together with my friend and sitting in his hot tub in Ohio. And he said, 2% of the people grow the food and 100% eat the food.
Mm-hmm.
No one knows each other. And they don't understand each other. They just don't know. And so we decided to put together something where we could talk about sustainable agriculture, talk about water. We could talk about the Farm Bill. We could talk about new developments, tractors, tractor maintenance, so many topics. It fills the plate. So those are 3 podcasts, and each has a specific business need. The business need for the Satellite Podcast was a big company that wanted brand awareness. Okay. And I started Federal Tech Podcast to make money. Farm Kid City Kid is kind of a fun project. We'll do it for a year. And you may not realize this, but there's some very big companies out there in the world of agriculture.
Oh, yeah.
And so if I can finagle my way in to get a sponsor there, hey, we're going for that. And so there's the goal for each one of them.
And they're different goals for each one.
I hope so. Yeah. Because I've had other podcasts in the past that have failed. I'll tell you one.
Sure.
So I live in Northern Virginia. 70% of the world's internet traffic goes through Northern Virginia.
Ashburn. Yep.
Yeah, right. There's all kinds of data centers. So I'm driving through Ashburn one day and go, I should have a podcast called Inside Data Centers.
Yeah.
And so I called up a company and said, let's do it. I said, yeah. And so we put together Inside Data Center podcast, and I got a sponsor, and we're doing great. And we're having people, and I was literally go into a data center, record from Inside Data Center.
That's really cool.
Talk about everything. And the company was so successful, they got bought out by NT&T. And then NT&T looked at me and said,
what are we doing the podcast for?
I mean, you know how big that company is? It's like, I'm not even a rounding error. And so they cut me.
That's a cool concept, though. So you were recording inside the data center. So I'm assuming like the hum of like all of the servers was captured on the audio.
Let's talk about cooling a data center. Let's talk about water consumption. What about taxes? What about employment? What about security? Mm-hmm. Who's here? Who's not here? And it was great. But then I learned that, boy, you get one sponsor, that's death wish. Whew.
And why do you say that?
Well, because I could cut. A CEO comes in. Mm-hmm. Hey, Bill Smith, new CEO. We hate you. You're out.
Gotcha.
But I perform. They don't care. And so I think my lesson is spread the bet. And I think if you have your own company and you have your own podcast, well, then you don't have to worry about that. But if you're going to rely on sponsors, that's a tough game. But if you have, for example, if I have 30 different, this month I'll probably do, 20 podcasts. And so if I can get 2 customers out of there, fine. And then I do for a year, that's 24 customers. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if for 2 years, that's 48. All of a sudden, if one of these has a new CEO and they hate me, well, fine. I got 47 others.
That's right. Smaller slices of the pie.
Yeah, I'd rather do the jabs than the big big hits, just jab, 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 because it's changing so much. So I think that's my advice for podcasters, that, boy, you pursue a soul. And I learned the lesson the hard way, In fact, I wrote an article for HubSpot called "I Failed at Podcasting and So Can You."
Well, failure is a stepping stone to success, right? So how many?
I hope so. It could be to another failure.
Sure. Yep. And then, but if that 10th one leads to a success.
No, wait, I'll tell you another failure. Here's John's failures. So I'm teaching at Georgetown, and all my in the graduate school there, and my students want to get jobs, and they want to meet CEOs, and they all want to work for startups. And I said, here's what we'll do. We'll have a podcast called Students versus Startups Showdown in the Potomac. So I launched this podcast, and I get sponsors because the students want to meet CEOs, and the CEOs, guess what they want to meet?
The students.
The students.
Yep.
So we got a room, got my audio engineer, and we get 3 students, and we get CEOs, and we went back and forth we did 60, 70 interviews, and I found a single sponsor for it because they were hiring my kids. And they were so successful, they were bought out by Maxar, Maxar, and Maxar looked at me and said,
there's a theme here.
I know. Yeah. The theme is you want to, hey, I'd be happy if I have Walmart as a sponsor. I'd be happy if I had AWS as a sponsor.
Maybe
I
not.
would be very wary of that. It's I think even if I had someone paying 80% of my stuff, I'd still go get, 10, 5% here, 2% there, something. So it's a trap. And so I think that's what you have to look at, the objective of your podcast, what you want out of it. Do you want increased reach and brand awareness for your company? Well, that's fine. You can't hard to put a monetary value to that. Do you want to actually sell a program, or do you want to sell consulting? There's another value to that. But so 1,200 podcast episodes, a lot of failures in there. Well, let's see. Yeah, it's about 100 failures in there. So, oh, were they successes? Maybe they're successes. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure there are. And I feel like, being able to sit down with people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk is, chalk that up as a win on, the personal accomplishments.
Yeah, it's great. I've been rejected by both, by the way. So, hey, I don't care. I'll be. So, do you know who Guy Kawasaki is?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're in class, and one of my students says, "Yeah, I like Guy Kawasaki." I said, "Let's get him to talk to class." So I had him speak to the class for an hour. It's like, wow, it's another skill that you have if you can do, I guess, podcasting. All of a sudden, your fear of asking someone is not a problem at all.
It's so true. Yeah. It unlocks conversations you wouldn't normally be able to have, right? We probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now if it wasn't for podcasting.
That's why I contacted you. One of my colleagues was Mark, and I said, "Oh, what's he doing on this podcast? What's going on?" So I contacted you, and I said, "We're both in Virginia. Hey, we can have some fun.
Let's do it." Yeah. And here we are. So John, you've got, you mentioned Federal News Radio, and you've got background in media, Washington Post, even some TV experience too. At what point did you notice podcasting had become a viable media channel?
Yeah. Back in 2006, I heard about it, and I thought it was too much of a time suck. Couldn't get any money from it. And believe it or not, I was working with a company called AOL.
Yep.
And they had audio there. And the goal was they wanted people to stay on long as possible. So I knew it was potential, but I didn't see any remuneration. How's that for a fancy
There you
word?
go. Show
me the money, man. No money. I couldn't see it. I mean, if you have a bowling podcast, sure. I got a tap dancing podcast. Oh, a clogging podcast. Well, that's fine, but it's not beneficial. So when I was at Federal News Network, it was one of the first digital only networks. Mm-hmm. And so everything was digital. So it's a podcast. And so what I noticed is that if you do a radio show and Sally Smith is on vacation, she may miss it. But if she's on vacation, she could listen to it as a podcast, couldn't she?
That's right.
Yeah. And so that's what I started noticing. And that's when kind of all things came together at one time. COVID came in. I started recording from a house here, and it got to be very easy. And I can. Do I need literally a $25 million radio studio for WTOP? The number one billing station in the country.
Wow. I didn't realize
10th
that.
market, number one billing in the country. And do I need a $25 million studio? Really? Well, I can go down to literally. So I got to go sick in COVID. I decided to go down to barbecue place and record from Monk's Barbecue.
There you go. All right.
And they loved it.
Is that in Purcellville, Monks?
Yeah.
Is that your spot?
Well, it's one of them. Then I went to Caboose Brewing. Went there. Then I went to Ford's Fish Shack, and so we'd get to, and they, what did you do today? Oh, I recorded a podcast at Caboose Brewing in Vienna. Really? And then I always have the photographer of my daughter's wedding. I always bring him and a professional audio engineer, and we get these great pictures. And so you can go to federaltechpodcast.com and look at the. I released the sample today, Jennifer sample. I interviewed her, a PhD, and she just ran 55 marathons in her whole life.
Oh, wow.
Finished one up. And so I got this picture of her. We went to her office in Reston and took pictures of her in front of a microphone, did a great interview. They're spreading it everywhere. I found the value in podcasting because you could listen different times. And also, secondarily, I could do it very independent of a big studio. I've been in many big studios. The whole NPR studio downtown, the big one, the brand new one, all of them. But, it can be done now where maybe 7 years ago, you'd have to get more equipment.
Yeah.
Now the equipment's easier.
And more affordable technology, has driven down the barriers of entry. Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. $25 million studio. Wow. That's incredible. And is that kind of what led you to founding the Oakmont group?
No. This whole story. I grow companies. People would hire me. I'd grow the company, then I'd get out, another company, get out. And I finished this one company. I said, I could grow my own company. And so I live in a part of Virginia where there's this town called Philemont, there's a town called Airmont, and a town called Bluemont. And my wife said, we probably need an Oakmont. The Oakmont group. And the first thing you do when you do a company is you go to a lawyer and you lawyer up. And so you get all the LLCs and then you find an accountant and you buy him dinner and your best friend's my accountant. And then I was settled. Then I started figuring out, well, how am I going to make money? Is it going to be public speaking? I can do that. Is it going to be putting on workshops? Is it going to be videos? I've done 250 videos. I had my own TV show for 2 years. Should I do TV? Well, what should I do? Should it be consulting? Should I help other podcasts grow? Should I grow my own? And so I wanted a kind of an umbrella term. So the umbrella is the Oakmont group. So what do you do? Oh, I put in starters for cars. What do you do? Oh, I shovel snow. I do podcasts. I do public speaking. And so what I wanted to have that flexibility because I knew the world was changing so quickly. If I started a company called the John Gilroy Public Speaking Company,
right,
or the John Gilroy Workshop Company, or the John Gilroy I Help You Grow Your Podcast Company, or just a generic, so what do you do? Well, what do you want done? So and I thought it was going to be public speaking, but I can do more with a microphone remotely than I can flying somewhere and getting on, telling bad jokes.
That's exactly right. It's funny that you bring that up because that's one challenge that I'm seeing pop up across like consultants and speakers is they're just tired of flying around the country giving these presentations, and they want to leverage their time a little bit better. They can leverage their speaking skills on a podcast and then reach the same amount of people that they would if they were to fly across the country, and that's a drag. And so that's a much more efficient use of their speaking skills and their time.
Now, here's another option. So let's say you charge $30,000 for a speaking gig, and so what you can do is you can use your podcast to promote your speaking skills.
That too.
And say, and then you have a qualified prospect because they say, hey, Rob, I listened to 5-10 podcast episodes, and I think you'd be a good fit with our company. All of a sudden, when you ask for $24,000, it becomes very easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I'm going to fly to Kansas City and I'm going to convince you to give me $24,000. No. It's like we know you already, and know, like, trust. And I think that's the value of increased reach and brand awareness. And you always help. And then if they said, hey, we need someone to go over and walk our dog. Okay, so, but the high ticket things like public speaking, it's so much more efficient that way. Then you don't have to, and all of a sudden you can command more money, can't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think I love that number, $24,000 for a speaking gig. I can't get it, but I'd love to get it though.
keep podcasting.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, no, this is too much fun doing this.
Yeah. Speaking of fun, you bring such great energy to all of your podcast conversations, and it was noticeable. As I was listening to many, across your different interviews, across the different podcasts, one thing that I noticed was that after each introduction, your guests are usually laughing, and
Yeah.
I just thought that was so great. Where does that energy come from?
Yeah. Well, it's the goal. So, do you know who Neil Patel is?
Yes.
Okay. So he had an infographic last week, and he ranked YouTube and podcasting and public speaking and how much time you need to get someone's attention. And if you look at the graph, it's 32 seconds for a podcast. And I believe him.
There you go.
Because you get little, Rohan Gupta, and he's trolling around for a podcast. Oh, what's this about? Tap dancing? Okay. I don't know if he's going to give you 30 seconds. He may give you, 20 seconds. Now, with Constellations, my audience is literally rocket scientists.
Right.
I've gone on and talked about the Lagrange point with physicists. And so they kind of know what to expect. So they know it's going to be some topic involved with space debris, or it's going to be something with collisions in space or communications to Mars. And so then I do that open, and I try to give them 30 seconds. And then if I can make it interesting enough that there's a laugh or something light, then, okay, now we're going to get serious. Because you start serious, you can lose them, man. Too much is going on, I mean, they're walking at the metro, trolling around, looking for podcasts. And what's this about? Oh, God.
Hook them.
And so it's 32 seconds, and I think that's a good one. And just like in public speaking, if I got to tell you this. So speaking of going to Mars, so I'm doing this interview with Vince Cerf, who is the father of the internet, and he's working for a company called Google. And I said, what's your biggest challenge here, Vin? I mean, in communicating to Mars. He said, my biggest challenge is the speed of light is too slow. That's above my pay grade, I think. I think I'm going to work on different things, like maybe, shoveling the snow. Or, I mean, really? That's your challenge?
Yeah.
And so that's it's a good opening. People say, well, the father of the internet's doing the internet to Mars. What are his challenges?
Wow, the speed of light is too slow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so I think there are podcasts about some moribund topics. I mean, we know that, and I don't go there. And so because again, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And so if I can hook someone's attention, fine, that's it.
Well, I think you bring up a really great point about your audience, and this show is all about podcasting and professional services. So, the folks that I talk about, topics around like accounting and finance and architecture and engineering. So these are pretty niche topics and very small addressable markets if you think about it, relative to like the Joe Rogan experience, right?
Yeah.
So, thinking of hooks in context with the sophistication of your audience, there's things that you can take from folks like Neil Patel, who talks about marketing from a very, very general perspective, and then apply them through that lens of your audience. So I thought that was a really cool way that you connected those dots there. So John, I want to shift gears a little bit, and let's have a conversation about the use of video in podcasting. We've had some differing opinions in the past on this, and I would just love to hear like your thoughts on, in your mind, when does it make sense, and what scenarios would audio only podcasts suffice? What are your thoughts?
Well, if you go to a bar with a bunch of football players, they're going to talk about, the Chiefs and the Eagles and yell and scream and throw chairs. And if you go to a group of people who are interested in opera, they may talk about, what's the best opera from Mozart? And is it Exultate Jubilate? Or what is it? And so if you get a room of podcasters, that's the debate, video or not to video. Yeah. That is the question, like it's some real big serious thing. I think my avocation is reading history. And I'm reading books about the 10th century right now. And so if you read a book about this guy named Napoleon, he said this thing. I love this quote. He goes, if you set out to take Vienna, take Vienna. Okay. So if you set out to have a good podcast, have a good podcast. Mm-hmm. Once you get to the point where it's successful, then you go down to Fiorenza or or whatever you want to go. And so I think that's the thing. And so I think people are maybe hitting 500 downloads a month, and they're plateauing. And they're going, you know what? If I had a video, maybe I'd go to 1,000 a month. Well, maybe if you worked on your open, you'd have more. Maybe if you got Audacity and you spent 3 hours practicing that open, then listened to it and corrected it, then you'd be better off. So I guess the plow's got to go deeper. Anyway, so if you want to talk about video, I think video is very expensive to do. I've done tons of it. I've done national TV. I've done local TV. I've done just too much stuff. You know, you can have a high quality microphone and good connection. You can have a podcast, but boy, that video and the editing, oh my. And I have this thing about editing. I never edit anything. Everything I do, I send to a professional audio engineer, knock it out and move on. And video editing is just so time consuming. You know? And you got to worry about so many things. And I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze. And there are luminaries. How's that there are luminaries in the podcasting world who are writing articles about, okay, here we go, why I'm ditching video content in 2025. That's interesting. This is Adam Schäuble, Schaubel, and he writes that. And there's other luminaries out there who are saying the same thing, is that back in 2024, they tried video and they're going back and, you know what, I can make my money on audio. I'm going to focus on that. So that's my opinion. And Georgetown University had a TV studio. I do TV interviews there all the time, and it was great, but they were very targeted, focused. I was almost designing them to be evergreen, you know? And I think my topics are changing so fast. It's just, so I do federal tech. So there's this thing called artificial intelligence. And so 1 week ago, there was an executive order about artificial intelligence. And if you go there now, it's 404 error. So it's changing so fast, you know? I mean, wow. If I did a video about that, hey, go to ABC and look at and here's what's changing is Zoom. And so that my world of technology, wow, if I can do a podcast twice a week and keep up, maybe I can keep up, maybe daily. I don't know.
That is so interesting. I just did so I've been, over the course of the past year, I've been keeping a record of different shows in professional services. And I've got a database of about like 300 different shows across all these different industries. And one of the characteristics I look at is publishing frequency. And what I noticed was technology-focused shows are much more likely to publish episodes weekly or more frequently than compared to accounting and financial services and even legal podcasts. So I think that's just a really great example of why it's so important to publish more frequently in a niche like technology.
Well, I agree. And so what I do though, is kind of the video goes, I use Libsyn, and Libsyn automatically sends the video to YouTube. So it adds to discoverability. I know that. I have a 3,000 by 3,000 image that I put for each episode. So if you go to YouTube and search Federal Tech Podcast, you'll see 200 episodes, each with a different. So I think that's important. And if I had the time to jump into YouTube and really learn how to optimize it, because you optimize it way differently than you do for my stuff. And it's true. And the podcast growth can grow, but things go different on YouTube. You know, you look at that headline, look at the thumbnail to make that decision. It's not 32 seconds, John. It's maybe a tenth of a second. And they look at the thumbnail instantly to make a decision. And so I think if I did videos, I'd probably put 60% of my money into artists doing the thumbnail, and then 20% into hiring someone to do the headline. And then somewhere along the way, I'll do the interview. It's just it's a different world. And some people can make the switch. You know, so I know people who speak Spanish and people who speak Portuguese, and they're different languages, and you can make the transition, but sometimes your accent's very strong in Portuguese or it's too strong in Spanish. And so then you don't speak either very well.
So I'm hearing, and let me reflect this back to you. So I'm hearing that kind of the cons against video in your mind are, you know, the time investment, the monetary investment, and the production element of it. Also, you know, things like the thumbnail and then the optimization of the YouTube separately from optimizing your podcasts on something like a Libsyn or a Podbean or a Buzzsprout. Yeah. Okay. So I want to throw something at you as kind of on the other end of the spectrum, kind of a pro for video. And much like we're doing right now on this platform, like on Riverside, I can see you. It's great for kind of like the dynamic conversation, but the little video snippets that you can take out from an episode and put them on platforms like LinkedIn, I think is like a great example. The mere exposure effect of your face on a screen, your target audience is scrolling through social media. They see your face over and over again, week after week after week after week. That mere exposure effect builds familiarity, which is a stepping stone to trust. Now, trust is a supreme character. It's so important in the professional services sale because we're not talking about $100 transactions. We're talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so that's why I think video is important, because that FaceTime, putting a face with a voice, hearing them, building that parasocial relationship, building familiarity. That's why I see video as an important part in the marketing of a professional services firm.
Counterpoint. Here's the counterpoint.
Sure.
I just put up a short video today on LinkedIn. It's an audiogram, and it has nothing to do with me. It's my guest and their logo, and it's a 30-second, and it says, come on my website and listen to more. And so I charge people to be on my podcast. And so what happens is a company come up to me and go, well, I'm ABC company. I'm trying to let people know what we do. And so you get the podcast and we get their name out there and their face out there. And the people increasingly have people more aware of their company. I think that's brand awareness again.
Sure.
And so my model is not get my face out there. My face has been out there for decades. I don't care about I care about their face because I'm charging them money to get my next podcast. So that's I think that's a key thing where, in fact, when I rarely get professional pictures taken of myself with, it's always the guest.
Yeah.
When I did Jennifer Sample, I had a professional, we probably had 70 pictures and I gave her 7. And out of those 70, I think I was in one of them because I don't care. I care about them. And so what she's going to do, she's going to show it to her boss and then her cousins and her friends and neighbors. And they go, and all of a sudden they're going to say, we should do more. And I go, that's what I'm here for. Come on back.
And for folks that are listening, if you're thinking about what kind of show to launch, that's one of the big powers of having a guest on your, an interview based series is that, while it's a little harder to inject your own thought leadership into an interview format, the fact that you're bringing the guest on, you're giving them shine, they are more likely to share it with their network. And word of mouth is still the number one way that new listeners discover podcasts. So leveraging your guests and their network and focusing on that and making it easy for your guests to share the episode, arming them with, different links to different platforms, different video assets, audiogram assets, like you're talking about, podcast episode pages. Like, John, I think you mentioned the other day that you do, was it episode pages on your website for every episode?
Oh, yeah. Show notes page.
And
I have their picture on there. I have their logo. I have a call to action. There's a quote, 250 words, use keywords. They can find it. And so what companies do is they'll take that show notes page and they'll bring it to their CEO and go, look, this is great. Let's do more. Okay. Now this is my own little model. I mean, if I were selling John Gilroy Consulting, or if I was selling John Gilroy, the audio course, I would do a solo show. Mm-hmm. Because a way different business model.
Exactly.
I mean, I think I realized that, there was one model, you get one sponsor. That failed on me twice. There's another model where you get a company to pay you to do the podcast. That's with Kratos. Kratos pays me to be the moderator. I love that. And my motto is I'll get 200 companies and ask 100 for money and get money from 30 of them. and one hates me, one likes me. New CEO in, they hate me. They don't like me. New CEO, and they bring me in. And so now there's a different model where you sell your products or services. And I think if I wanted to become an authority, I would be John Gilroy. I'm the authority on bowling in Virginia. And you'd come to me for bowling lessons. And I think I do solo episodes, and I'd always have a call to action where they'd go on my mail list. And I think that's a lesson for your people is that, boy, the mail list is just so much more important than anything.
That's true.
YouTube, blah, LinkedIn, Twitter, blah, who cares? Oh, yeah. show me the money. That's the money. The email. So I think across any podcast, company podcast, interview podcast, solopreneur, that email list is so much.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask that. My next question was going to be, what is the number one piece of advice you would give to a first-time podcaster? And it sounds like building an email list may be that number one piece of advice.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah. In fact, farmkidcitykid.com, we don't have any podcast release yet. We have a mail list though. We've had a mail list for 3 months. And you go to farmkidcitykid.com and go there and register for the next episode, because that's how important I think it is. Because, the algorithm from LinkedIn is going to change. Facebook's going to change. Yeah. What TikTok's going out of business? I don't know. They're all going to change. If you own the email list, well, you're not going to change. You'd have the emails. You finally have something to control. Finally, well, man. And hey, the next episode is going to be okay, good. Oh, by the way, I have a workshop coming up on a 10. And so that's really good. And again, it all depends on now. I think if I were an architect, I would structure a podcast to be a thought leader in a certain area. For example, this is the energy efficient podcast about architecture. You could talk about, going LED and all that kind of stuff or whatever, If you were a civil engineer and you want to do the concrete podcast on concrete techniques, we're going to talk about hot weather concreting and water reducing concrete admixtures, or have a very specific benefit. And so if I were an architect company or a civil engineer, I'd have all kinds of benefits and hey, download the white paper on hot weather concreting, download the white paper on air and train concrete, download the paper on non-plastic concrete admixtures. And then you could establish yourself as an expert and go from there. So I think there's a lot of different, and my peculiar personality lends to this approach that I have. And it's possible that in 2025, no one will give me any money and say, no, Federal Tech Podcast, we hate that. And I'll go, well, fine. And I'll jump to Farm Kid, City Kid and go back to finding a big company. John Deere, give me $100,000 for this podcast. Are you even going to notice it? You wouldn't even notice that, yeah. John Deere. They sell tractors for $600,000.
Yeah.
Really? And so maybe go back to the old, hey, I failed at that before and I'll try again and fail. But if I have 3 podcasts and one of them's a big company, one is just me, one they're paying me to moderator, I've got my bases covered here, man. It's like, invest in stocks and bonds. And
You've diversified your assets there.
Yeah. But your listeners can take a lesson from one of those.
That's exactly right.
And the lesson, I think, is email. And then once you get to the point where the other advice is, I see so many people, they start the podcast. It's, hey, this is the John Gilroy podcast about ready-mix concrete. And yesterday, my dog, Blue, went upstairs and raisins and my next door neighbor has a snowblower. Really? Well, I had a snowblower in Ohio. And they don't get to it. So number one, get an email list. Number one, when you set out Take Vienna, hook them. Today, we're going to talk with a guy who did 1,200 podcast episodes and give you tips on how you can be successful. That's your open. I just wrote it for you right there.
I might just grab that soundbite, put it in the front.
That's the hook. I want to be successful. Well, here's this guy who made all kinds of mistakes. He wrote an article on how I failed in podcasting. He's still punching. So maybe we'll see what he figured out.
Oh, man. Well, John, this has just been an incredible conversation. I've learned a ton just from listening to your experience and learning vicariously through all of your failures and all of your successes.
I've learned through your failures. Why, thanks.
Is there anything that we didn't talk about that we should have, or is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, the moment to think you know everything, you're going to get blindsided. It happens in the NFL all the time, Yeah. And so I think I knew everything about podcasting. I think I knew everything about, Well, guess what? I don't. And so I participate in a local community. It's the Bethesda Podcasters Meetup. And once a month, we get like 15, 20 people on a Zoom call for an hour, and we talk about everything. And they talk about social media. They talk about transcripts. We talk about microphones. We'll talk about promotion using LinkedIn, video, audio. And I'm constantly learning new things. And so I think if you have a successful podcast and you're making money and you think you're doing good, well, guess what? There's too many things to know. So come to the Bethesda meetup, go to a local group. It's in Chicago or LA or wherever you have, because people are going to tell you things. I never thought of doing that. Well, I know everything. Oh, you really do? You do? Well, there's too much going on now. I mean, this whole, maybe the video debate is going to change in the next 6 months. I don't know. And what's going to happen with the search engine by the way, I have a show notes page, and I have meta description. I have keywords, and I run it through different Screaming Frog to make sure it's optimized for SEO. And maybe that's old hat.
Well, search isn't just Google anymore. Search is, people are using the
everywhere.
The Spotify search bar. I was just searching on Apple,
I know, right?
Yep.
So maybe all my optimization for SEO is a bunch of cabbage. Hey, you're a loser. Maybe, I don't know. But companies like it. And
that's true.
When they can look and see a picture of themselves and audio, then, wow, kind of good. Well, look at this. And go to my site, 200 pictures of someone else and one picture of me on the whole silly site. So that's how it works now. But again, different podcast, different goal. I think you said you did architecture type, and I think that's a little niche there. And you can go to so many different areas of architecture and become an expert in that little niche, and then go from there. Now, what Neil Patel says is the riches aren't in the niches, the riches aren't in the niches. You have to go TAM, which is total addressable market, and go wide. And so
I disagree. 100% disagree with that.
I know. There's a debate. I mean, and so I think, and you can debate that in a small room of 10 podcasters.
Yeah.
Okay. And they can say, well, what about Riverside? What do you think? Oh, well, what about, Libsyn? Yeah. Well, oh, really? How did that happen? Who do you hire to do your audio engineering? Okay. What about a photographer? Can you get a photographer for me? And so it's just, there's things that you don't even realize.
You don't know what you don't know until, you have these conversations with other people who are on different journeys and, on different, maybe they're a few steps further along than you are, or maybe you're just a few steps further along than someone else, and you can help share your wisdom with them, take wisdom from other people. Podcasting, I love to say there's no rules in podcasting, right? So like we talked about, you don't even need to pigeonhole yourself into, I'm just going to do an interview show. You can have monologues, you can have co-hosted commentary, bringing on the same guest a couple times, and you can experiment and try new things. And that's what's so beautiful about it. And that's why community is so important, because podcasting, especially in business, it's still a new phenomenon, and there's a lot of unknowns, and there's no right way to do it. There's so many different ways. And so I think your point is well taken. The power of community and going to those local meetups, like the monthly one in Bethesda. So.
Yeah, good. I talked about video and audio and languages. So I'll give you a little Portuguese with a Spanish accent. You want to hear it?
Sure.
Olha aqui, pô. Meu nome é João da Silva. Eu estou aqui no Washington, D.C., falando com o João aqui, tá? There's Portuguese with a Spanish accent.
I heard Washington, D.C. And what was
Lógico, estou aqui na Washington aqui. E você também, hein? Lógico. Puxa, vai que arrebenta. Yeah. When people hear that, they go, what a funny accent that is. When Brazilians hear it. Yeah, it's a Spanish accent because I learned Spanish first. Then when I switch to Spanish, then they run away screaming. They go, ha! He's on drugs or something. So, podcasting versus audio. You may have an accent, a podcasting accent, when you do the video. It's a funny world out there. Next time we'll do it in Portuguese. How's that sound?
I'll have to brush up on my Portuguese, but
bem fácil. A gente pode falar.
Spanish would be much easier for me.
Tá bom. Entonces tenemos que hablar en español con un acento de Portugal. See, I said the way the Portuguese say Portugal. Portugal. They have a funny L. So avoid your 40 L's when you do your podcast in Portuguese.
Well, John, thank you so much for your time. Okay. Folks that are listening to this, check out Federal Tech Podcast, check out Constellations, a podcast by Kratos, and check out Farm Kid, City Kid. John, thank you so much for your time and all of the stories.
O prazer foi meu.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to my conversation with John Gilroy. If you found this episode insightful, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, subscribe on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out at redcedarmarketing.com if you're ready to launch a business podcast for your company. And we'll see you next time on Podcasting and Professional Services. Happy podcasting.